So that's basically it as far as the sections that deal with Balaam directly. We will mention him again. We've read about him dying by the sword in Numbers 31. But we're not totally done with this section yet. Now we're going to go back to Israel and see what happens there. When Israel was staying in, excuse me. When Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women. And there would have been a mixture of Midianites in here too. We read back at the beginning of this section that the king of Moab was talking with the elders of Midian. And we'll read later on that the Israelites are told by God to avenge themselves on Midian. Okay, so there was a mixture of Moabites and Midianites in this alliance. They were aligned at this point in time. So when Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women, who invited them to the sacrifices to their gods. The people ate and bowed down before these gods. So Israel joined in worshiping the Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger burned against them. We read way back in Revelation. We have to go all the way to the end of the Bible to get the big reveal that Balaam was behind this. For some reason, that's not mentioned in the text itself here. I really don't know why. But Balaam, in the end, he loved the wages of wickedness, and he erred for profit, which we read about in 2 Peter and in Jude. And he wanted this reward that Balak was going to give him. He could not do it by cursing Israel. So instead, apparently, and again, it doesn't actually say this here. We find this out in Revelation. Apparently, his solution then was to give Balak the idea to send some of his women, his nation's women, into Israel and entice the Israelite men to, seduce them and entice them into following them into sexual immorality and prostrating themselves before Baal of Peor, the local Baal of Peor. So that is what ended up working, and that actually worked. Like we'll read about that strategy actually had a measure of success. So Balaam could never end up cursing Israel, but he did find another way to suggest Balak to how to attack them. I don't know if Balaam got his reward from Balak or not. I guess he did. I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, it's not actually mentioned here. Balaam apparently masterminded this plan and gave Balak the idea to do this after his efforts to curse Israel didn't pan out. Apparently he went back and gave him this idea to seduce Israel this way. Maybe Balak went ahead and paid him the reward after all. Even if he did, he didn't get to enjoy it very long because he gets killed in the revenge conquest just a little bit later. So he wanted to die. He said back in the first oracle, "Let me die the death of the righteous, and may my end be like theirs." But he ends up dying the death of the sinners and having cast his lot with the sinners because he wanted his reward. He wanted his reward from Balak and not from God. And God ultimately let him have that. Like that, we saw how God let him go on his way once it became clear that Balaam wasn't going to be talked out of it. So he turned him over to his sin, his sinful desire, and ended up being the end of him. The Lord said to Moses, "Take all the leaders of these people, kill them, and expose them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the Lord's fierce anger may turn away from Israel." So Moses said to Israel's judges, remember these guys, the guys that Moses had appointed to be the judges? "Each of you must put to death those of your men who have joined in worshiping the Baal of Peor." So the leaders that the Lord is referring to in verse 4 apparently are the leaders of the rebellion, apparently. Then an Israelite man brought to his family a Midianite woman. So we read back in verse 1, there are Moabite women here. But we read also back in chapter 22 that it was an alliance between the king of Moab and the elders of Midian. And we're going to read in a few chapters that the Lord tells the Israelites to avenge themselves on Midian. So there's a mixture of Moabites and Midianites in here. So an Israelite man brought to his family a Midianite woman, right before the eyes of Moses and the whole assembly of Israel, while they were weeping at the entrance to the tent of meeting. When Phinehas, I'm guessing they had committed, I'm guessing they had gone ahead and pulled off the executions, I'm guessing. When Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, we go from Aaron to Eleazar to Phinehas, saw this, he left the assembly, took a spear in his hand, and followed the Israelite into the tent. He drove the spear through both of them, through the Israelite into the woman's body. So they must have been having sex, I'm assuming. The image I'm getting here is that they were lying down on top of each other. She was on the bottom, he was on the top, and they were getting ready to engage in sex if they hadn't already started. And then while they were in that position, Phinehas drove the spear through both of them, man on top, woman on bottom, and that seems to be what's going on here. Then the plague against the Israelites was stopped, but those who died in the plague numbered 24,000. The Lord said to Moses, Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, has turned my anger away from the Israelites, for he was as zealous as I am for my honor among them, so that in my zeal I did not put an end to them. So we had another example of the plague working its way through the camp, and the priest stopping it by his intercessory acts. We saw that back in the Korah rebellion, and how Aaron then acted as an intercessor by standing in between the living and the dead with the fire of atonement. And there were almost 15,000 dead then. Now there's 24,000 dead, and Phinehas puts an end to the plague by acting as a mediator, as standing in and satisfying the wrath of God. Therefore tell him I am making my covenant of peace with him. He and his descendants will have a covenant of a lasting priesthood, because he was zealous for the honor of his God and made atonement for the Israelites. So the high priesthood now is going to be traced through Aaron's son Eleazar's son Phinehas. So Eleazar will be the next high priest after Aaron. Phinehas will be the next high priest after Eleazar, and so on and so forth. So the priests are all the sons of Aaron, and the high priests are the sons of Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron. The name of the Israelite who was killed with the Midianite woman was Zimri, son of Salu, the leader of a Simeonite family. And the name of the Midianite woman who was put to death, we usually don't get the woman's name, but we do in this case, was Cosbi, daughter of Zur, a tribal chief of a Midianite family. So remember, way back in chapter 22, Balak was talking to the elders of Midian. So this must have been one of them, Zur here, and this is his daughter he sent. The Lord said to Moses, treat the Midianites as enemies and kill them, because they treated you as enemies when they deceived you in the affair of Peor, and their sister Cosbi, the daughter of a Midianite leader, the woman who was killed when the plague came as a result of Peor. So that brings an end to that sordid chapter in their history. They're still on the plains of Moab. They still haven't actually moved into the promised land yet. The conquest campaign has not begun. But they've been interrupted by this affair with this whole thing with the Moabite Midianite alliance infiltrating them through their women, by sending their women in there and seducing their men, which apparently again was suggested by Balaam to Balak after the plan to curse Israel failed. But again, this text doesn't say that. We have to go all the way to late in the New Testament to find that out. But Balaam is punished along with the rest of the Midianites in chapter 31 when this vengeance on the Midianites is taken. So that there is a connection there even in the text, but it's not made very explicit.